Is this the oldest pub in England, or is it all a massive lie?
If you want to ingrain yourself in British culture, get yourself to the pub. Get yourself a nice cold pint, or a bit of a warm one if you're one of those real ale types, bag of scampi fries and a bag of pig bits, and get yourself settled in for the night. A lot of places claim that they're the oldest pub in England. We're at one of them now, but is it all a massive lie?
Pubs have been part of British culture for years, thousands of years, literally thousands of years. But what is the oldest pub in England? Pubs are a breeding ground for tall tales. We've all been collared by that guy in the pub who swears he was signed to Manchester United, but his slightly dodgy knee cost him his contract. Or, you know, the guy who won't stop talking about all the UFOs he's seen, or he's been abducted by aliens. I mean, that happens a lot in Cornwall. They're really into that kind of stuff there. So it won't surprise you that with all these tall tales, there's actually many pubs in England that claim to be the oldest pub in England.
Some claim to be in the Domesday Book of 1086, or have unearthed some historical records, or have ties with the Anglo-Saxons or the Knights of Templar. But sometimes historical evidence is just really thin on the ground, so sometimes it just feels made up. Where we live in Nottingham, we have 3 pubs that claim to be the oldest pub in England.
So right here at the Ye Olde trip to Jerusalem, they claim to have traced their heritage back to 1189, all the way back to 1189. So built into the rock face and the caves that are behind us, this whole area was part of Nottingham Castle up until the 17th century, which is where the earliest reference to this building actually being a building is from, which is 1751. It actually being a pub doesn't appear on any records until 1799, which is obviously way after 1189. So, is it all a massive lie? Yeah, probably. I can't find any other evidence that this was a pub in any way, shape or form to back up their claims. The oldest parts of the building don't actually date back past 1650. There's a lot of dates in this video, by the way, so prepare to be confused. The oldest parts of the building don't really date back past 1650. An old map kind of shows a building here around 1610, but that's the best evidence of there being anything here back then. So the evidence that the pub actually clings to, that they're the oldest pub in England, is that Richard the Lionheart, King Richard, came here possibly, maybe, as he was about to set off for Jerusalem, hence the name Ye Olde Trip to Jerusalem. And that during that bit, this area was possibly, maybe, used as a brew house for the castle. Which doesn't make it a pub, but it makes it an area which had booze. We'll get onto that later.
Who knows, but it hasn't stopped them putting up a big sign. It is, however, still massively worth a visit. They have, apparently, a haunted statue of a ship that will kill anyone that cleans it, and a chair that helps people get pregnant. So maybe you can see why we think they might be lying a little tiny bit. But you know who else thinks they're lying? The folks over at the Bell Inn.
So the Bell Inn has been documented as an alehouse since about 1539, and it has concrete evidence that it was a building since 1437, when it was built as a rectory for monks. But not content with 600 years of history, they lay claim to go all the way back to the 12th century. And then where does that claim come from? Well, this area is known as Friar Lane, bits of it, not this exact bit, but bits of it, where it was a friary for monks, and they may have made some beer on this site at that point. So they're kind of claiming that just because beer was made here, it was an alehouse / pub. I don't know. Again, it's a lot of twisting the truth. And yeah, we're in speculation mode again.
So the third contender for this triple threat match for not only the oldest pub in Nottingham, but the oldest pub in England, is Ye Olde Salutation Inn, with an estimated date of 1240. So the oldest parts of the pub have been dated back to 1360, so they're off to a good start. And as it's Nottingham, the oldest parts are always going to be caves. Underneath the pub, there's a series of man-made caves, but unlike a lot of Nottingham, these caves are really large, and there's evidence of them being used to store stuff like food before the days of refrigeration, but also maybe beer. And some of these caves have been dated back to the 9th century, so yeah, they're really old.
So the actual history of the building is a bit foggy. It was used as a tannery at one point, turning animal skins into leather. Then it was a house, and then it became a pub. The original name for the pub was the Archangel Gabriel Saluting the Virgin Mary, which hands down is the worst name for a pub I've ever heard. Later it became Soldier and Citizen, which is not much better, before becoming Ye Olde Salutation Inn, or the Sal as everyone calls it. So a massive lie? Who knows? It's everyone has a different tale, and I'm not sure what's the truth at this point. They also claim to be one of the most haunted pubs in the entirety of the country. They've had over hundreds and hundreds of sightings of ghosts and apparitions and paranormal activity throughout the pub, which, yeah, again, probably lends credence to the idea that they may be bending the truth a little bit.
In around 1998, Channel 4's Time Team did an episode called Three Pubs, where they looked into these three pubs that we've just been to, and they found that the Cell was likely the oldest building in Nottingham, but they found that the Bell was most likely the oldest actual pub. But these are just the Nottingham pubs. Which other pubs actually make the claim? So the Royal Standard of England in Beaconsfield has more tales of ghosts and highway robbery, and is dated back to 1086. And it's actually in the Doomsday books from that date as a pub called the Ship Inn. There's a lot to go on with this one, but we'll leave a link underneath so you can actually read their story. Apparently it's haunted by Little Drummer Boy, and King Charles, not this one, once hid in a tiny hole. Fun fact, it did make an appearance in Hot Fuzz, so that's pretty cool. And its Instagram handle is literally the oldest pub, so they've tried.
Next up, you've got the Old Ferry Boat Inn in St Ives, which claims 560 AD. And yes, if you're curious, once again, it's haunted as hell. They claim alcohol has been served on the site since 560, which is kind of a weak link, given that no one can tell that it was a pub since like the 1400s. That's the earliest date that it was the actual pub. I mean, booze has been served in my apartment for the last 6 years, but I can't claim that's a pub, can I? Well, unless that gives me some sort of weird tax break. I don't know, let me know in the comments. Can I get a tax break for pretending to be a pub? I don't know.
Next up, the Porch House in Stow-on-the-Wold has claimed to be a pub since 947 AD. The building was carbon dated then, but there's no actual claims for it to be a pub until 1700s.
And then there's Ye Olde Fighting Cocks in St Albans, which kind of has the Guinness Book of Records on its side. And it's kind of mainly due to the fact that the pub itself is built on what used to be like a palace of some sort, which does date back to 793 AD. But it's only had its current name since 1872, although some records say there is a building that's been there since the 11th century, but back then it was a pigeon house.
What's a pigeon house?
I've no idea what a pigeon house is. I assume it's a house for pigeons.
I want to go there.
So, do you have to be the oldest pub to claim you're the oldest pub? Or does having a really old building make you the oldest pub if you put a pub in there? I don't know.
But then there's the Ye Old Man Scythe in Bolton, which humbly claims to be the fourth oldest inn in England. But it does claim to be the oldest cider house. There's no indication of which pubs they think are above it, but they do say that they're mentioning a charter in 1251 that's saying that the building was there. And of course, again, it's haunted.
So, thoughts. What is the oldest pub in England? I mean, who knows at this point? They've all got a lot of told tales, ghost stories, and various different evidence bits, but who knows? Did it need to be a pub to be called the oldest pub in England? There's a Roman lighthouse down in Dover, which dates way back to the 1st century, and it's probably one of our oldest buildings in England that isn't like a mausoleum or a grave. If we set up a pub in there, can we then call ourselves the oldest pub in England because that building's literally the oldest in England? I don't know. Do Guinness World Records even count? Both the Porch House and Ye Olde Fighting Cocks claim to have a Guinness World Record. Is a brewery a pub? If monks decided to serve drinks to themselves on a site, does that count? How many ghosts do you actually need to be considered one of the oldest pubs in England? I mean, everyone seems to have a lot of ghosts, so maybe that's like a prerequisite, I don't know. Look, I don't think anyone's ever going to know the answer, but All three of these pubs that we've featured in Nottingham are well worth a visit. They're all pretty damn cool in their own right, and they're all pretty damn old, older than a lot of things in the world, right? So grab a pint, sit down, explore the caves, have a look, and see what you can find. It is worth a visit for sure. And hey, maybe next we'll actually get to go to some of these other old pubs across the country and explore them as well.
So, as always, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something this time, you know, rather than just as liking and thinking places are cool. So, like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you soon.